In the autumn of 1985, Reverend Clara Harper, a white female pastor in the small coastal town of Rockport, Maine, vanished without a trace, leaving her congregation and family grasping at shadows and whispers. The tight-knit community, nestled between rugged cliffs and the restless waves of Penobscot Bay, was left with only rumors. Some said she'd fled her calling. Others whispered of foul play. 25 years later, in the crisp October of 2010, a construction crew clearing land for a seaside condominium project uncovered a secret buried beneath an ancient, moss-covered stone wall, a truth meant to remain entombed forever. Amelia Harper, now 40, sat alone in her modest apartment overlooking the bay, the early Saturday morning light filtering through salt-streaked windows. The distant crash of waves against the rocky shore blended with the low hum of her radio, tuned to a local station playing soft jazz. A former Navy medic who had served on destroyers during tense deployments in the Persian Gulf, Amelia had faced gunfire and triage under pressure, but nothing had scarred her like the mystery of her mother's disappearance. Her childhood had been steeped in the warmth of her mother's sermons at Grace Covenant Church, where Clara's voice had once lifted hearts with hope and conviction. But when Clara vanished, Amelia's faith crumbled, replaced by a hollow anger that lingered like sea fog. She turned up the radio, hoping to drown out the memories, but a guest preacher's voice broke through, his words of redemption echoing Clara's cadence. The sound was a knife to her heart. With a sharp breath, she switched it off, the silence heavy with ghosts. Her phone buzzed on the scarred oak table in her kitchen, jolting her from her thoughts. She hesitated, expecting a telemarketer, but answered. "Ms. Harper, this is Detective Emily Vaughn from the Rockport Police Department," a calm, authoritative voice said. Amelia's pulse quickened. "Is this some kind of joke? My mother's case is ancient history, 25 years old." Vaughn's tone didn't waver. "No joke, ma'am. A construction crew working near Penobscot Bay uncovered a weathered leather satchel buried under a stone wall. Inside was a pastoral stole and a prayer book inscribed with your mother's name. We need you to come to the site to identify them. Can we send officers to pick you up?" Amelia's breath caught, her fingers tightening around the phone. "A prayer book with her name?" she whispered, disbelief warring with a flicker of hope. "Yes," Vaughn replied. "We're ready to bring you out if you're willing." Amelia agreed, her mind a whirlwind as she pulled on a navy sweater, jeans, and worn boots. Passing the silent radio, she felt a twinge of guilt for the resentment she'd nursed against the faith her mother had lived and breathed. Clara had been a beacon, a rare woman pastor in a conservative town, and Amelia had once believed in her mother's God. Now, she wasn't so sure. The police cruiser arrived within minutes, its lights dim in the morning mist. Amelia climbed in, the drive silent as they wound along coastal roads, past lobster boats bobbing in the harbor and pine-dotted cliffs. The site was a 20-minute drive from Rockport Center, a remote stretch of land where the forest met the sea. Amelia wondered how her mother's belongings could have ended up so far from the church or their old home on Maple Street. At the scene, yellow tape fluttered in the breeze, cordoning off a cleared patch of earth where officers photographed a crumbling stone wall and the disturbed soil beneath. Detective Emily Vaughn, a woman in her late 40s with sharp green eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted her. "Ms. Harper, thank you for coming. This is Jake Morrow, the foreman who found the satchel." Jake, a stocky man with calloused hands and a flannel shirt, stepped forward, his expression somber. "Morning, ma'am. Sorry about the circumstances." Amelia shook his hand, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "Can you tell me how you found it?" Jake gestured to the stone wall, its weathered slabs partially dismantled, moss clinging to their edges. "We were tearing down this old boundary wall for a condo development. One section looked off, stones were misaligned, like someone rebuilt it in a hurry years ago. When we lifted a heavy slab, we found the satchel buried in a shallow pit, packed tight with dirt. Inside was the stole and prayer book. It didn't feel right, finding something so personal out here, so we called the police." Amelia approached the satchel, laid carefully on a blue tarp beside the wall. She studied the stones, their uneven placement hinting at a deliberate act of concealment. Why here in this desolate place? Jake scratched his neck, his voice thoughtful. Whoever did this put in real effort. The soil under that slab was looser than the rest, like it was dug up and repacked long ago. They chose a spot no one would stumble across, not without heavy equipment. Detective Vaughn led Amelia to a canvas tent set up nearby, where officers were cataloging the evidence. "We need you to confirm if these items belong to your mother," Vaughn said, her tone professional but empathetic. Inside, officers wearing gloves handled the items with care. The prayer book, its leather cover warped and stained from years underground, bore Clara Harper in faded gold lettering on the front. Amelia's throat tightened as she opened it, recognizing her mother's elegant, looping handwriting on the inside cover. A dedication to her ministry, dated 1980. Tucked between the pages was a folded note. Not a standard prayer, but a desperate plea written in Clara's hand. "Lord, grant me courage to face the darkness within your house. Why do your servants stray from your path?" Amelia's voice trembled as she read it aloud. This is her handwriting. She wrote notes like this in her journals, always wrestling with faith and duty. The stole came next, a deep green fabric with gold embroidery, its edges frayed but intact, bearing faint water stains but no obvious signs of blood. "We'll send it for DNA testing," Vaughn said. "Our local lab in Rockport is small, so it'll go to the state facility in Augusta for analysis." Amelia ran her fingers over the stole's delicate stitching, memories flooding back of her mother standing at the pulpit, her presence commanding yet warm. "This was hers," she said softly. "She wore it for Sunday services. The size, the embroidery, it's exactly as I remember." A chill gripped her. "Do you think someone killed her?" Vaughn's expression was measured. "There's no clear evidence of violence on these items, no blood or tears. It's possible she left voluntarily, perhaps abandoned her role as pastor and buried these to sever ties with her past. Or someone else hid them to cover something up." Amelia shook her head, her voice firm. "My mother wouldn't run. Her faith was her life. She'd never abandon her congregation or me. And why go to such lengths to bury this satchel in the middle of nowhere?" Jake nodded, his brow furrowed. Digging that pit and rebuilding the wall would have taken hours, maybe a whole night, especially if one person did it alone. "Those slabs are heavy. Some weigh over 200 pounds. Vaughn scribbled in her notebook, her eyes narrowing. Were there people in town or at Grace Covenant who had issues with her? Anyone who might have wanted her gone? Amelia sighed, her mind drifting to the 1980s, a time when Rockport's conservative roots clashed with progressive ideals. She was a woman pastor in a small town, preaching in 1985. That alone ruffled feathers. Some older congregants, especially men, didn't think a woman should lead a church. They'd whisper about proper roles or question her authority, but she was gentle, devoted. She wouldn't hurt anyone, and she tried to win them over with kindness. Vaughn nodded, her pen pausing. "We'll review the old case files and look into any conflicts she might have had. For now, we'll process the evidence and send you photos once they're documented." Amelia agreed, her mind racing with possibilities. Could someone have resented her mother enough to harm her? Or was there another secret buried with that satchel? An officer drove her back to Rockport, the coastal road winding past lobster traps and weathered docks, the sea a constant murmur in the background. Back at her apartment, Amelia didn't rest. Instead, she went to the spare bedroom she'd turned into a shrine of sorts for her mother's belongings. After selling their family home on Maple Street years ago, she'd kept Clara's study intact, shelves lined with sermon journals, personal diaries, theological texts, and a small wooden cross Clara had carved herself. As a teenager, Amelia had sat at her mother's desk, studying those journals under Clara's patient guidance, memorizing passages about grace and redemption. At 15, faith had been her anchor. At 40, it was a distant memory, eroded by loss and unanswered questions. She searched the shelves for Clara's 1985 sermon journal, hoping it held clues to her mother's final days, but it was missing. So was her personal diary from that year, though every other year's records were meticulously arranged. The absence felt like a deliberate wound. Clara had been obsessive about documenting her thoughts, her sermons, her prayers. Why were those specific volumes gone? Amelia pulled an older sermon journal from 1984 off the shelf, its leather cover worn but familiar. She traced her mother's handwriting, the precise loops and flourishes that had once filled her childhood with certainty. The journal contained sermon outlines, each one a testament to Clara's passion for her flock. Amelia remembered helping her mother prepare for Sunday services, fetching hymnals or lighting candles in the sanctuary. Those moments felt like another lifetime. She tucked the journal under her arm, determined to visit Grace Covenant Church for the first time in 25 years. If the missing 1985 records weren't at home, perhaps they were still at the church, overlooked in the chaos of Clara's disappearance. She grabbed her keys and headed out, the weight of the past pressing against her chest as she drove toward the bluff where the church stood, its steeple a silhouette against the gray October sky. Grace Covenant Church loomed on the edge of Rockport, its white clapboard exterior weathered by decades of sea air, but its presence as commanding as ever. The stained glass windows glowed softly in the late morning light, casting patterns of crimson and sapphire across the polished oak pews. Amelia pushed open the heavy wooden door, the creak echoing in the quiet sanctuary. The air smelled of wax and old hymnals, unchanged from her childhood. She remembered sitting in the front row as a girl, watching her mother deliver sermons with a voice that could hush a storm. Now, the emptiness of the space mirrored the void in her heart. An elderly woman near the altar, arranging flowers, turned and smiled warmly. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice gentle but curious. Amelia introduced herself, her voice catching slightly. "I'm Amelia Harper, Clara Harper's daughter. I'm looking for someone who might have known my mother." The woman's eyes widened, her hand pausing over a vase of chrysanthemums. "Amelia? My goodness, I'm Pastor Margaret Ellis. I served alongside your mother years ago." Before Amelia could respond, a man in his early 70s entered from a side door, his face lined but familiar. "Reverend Daniel Pierce," he said, extending a hand, though his smile faltered when he heard her name. "Clara's daughter? It's been a long time." Both seemed genuinely shocked to see her, their warmth tinged with something Amelia couldn't place. Unease, perhaps. She explained the discovery of the satchel, the stole, and the prayer book, and her search for Clara's missing 1985 sermon journal and personal diary. "I don't believe she abandoned us or took her own life," Amelia said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I need to know what happened to her." Margaret and Daniel exchanged a glance, brief but heavy. "Your mother was a saint," Margaret said carefully, adjusting a flower stem. "A woman of unshakable faith. But no one can know the depths of another's heart." Daniel nodded, his hands clasped tightly. In her final weeks, Clara spent late nights here, alone in the sanctuary, praying. She called it deep devotion, but her prayers, they sounded anguished, like she was wrestling with something heavy, something she wouldn't share. Amelia's chest tightened. Her mother had always been open with her, even as a teenager, sharing her joys and burdens. What could have weighed so heavily that Clara hid it? She pulled out the 1984 sermon journal, its leather cover worn but intact. Her 1985 journal would look like this, she said, opening it to show Clara's meticulous notes. Same binding, same handwriting. She kept one every year, but that one's missing along with her personal diary from '85. "Have you seen them?" Margaret frowned, studying the journal. "I don't recall seeing anything like that, but it's been years. We can look in the church office and library." Daniel agreed, though his expression remained guarded. They led Amelia to the office, once Clara's, now cluttered with Margaret's books and papers. They searched shelves, drawers, and filing cabinets, but found no trace of the 1985 records. Next, they moved to the church library, a small room lined with theological texts and dusty archives. For nearly an hour, they sifted through boxes and shelves, Amelia's hope fading with each empty drawer. Distracted by Margaret's earlier words about her mother's anguish, She set the 1984 journal on a library table, forgetting it in the flurry of searching. As they concluded with nothing to show, Amelia thanked them, her voice heavy with disappointment. Before leaving, she paused at a pew, the wood smooth under her fingers, and whispered a prayer, her first in years. "If you're out there, show me what happened to her. Please." She left the church, unaware she'd forgotten the journal, her mind churning with questions about her mother's final days. Driving back toward town, Amelia's thoughts turned to her father, who had died of a sudden heart attack in 1984, a year before Clara's disappearance. His loss had shattered them both, leaving Clara to navigate her ministry and grief alone while raising a teenage Amelia. The pain of that year had bonded them, mother and daughter leaning on each other through sleepless nights and tearful prayers. Could Clara's anguish in 1985 have stemmed from that grief, pushing her to some desperate act? Amelia rejected the thought. Her mother was resilient, her faith a rock. On impulse, she turned her car toward Bayside Cemetery, where her father was buried, stopping at a small florist on the edge of town. The shopkeeper, an older woman with kind eyes, wrapped a bouquet of white lilies. "Visiting someone special?" she asked. "My father," Amelia replied. "It's been too long." Cemetery was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the headstones. Amelia walked to her father's grave, marked by a simple granite stone. James Harper, beloved husband and father, 1940 to 1984. She laid the lilies at its base, her fingers lingering on the cool stone. "Hi, Dad," she whispered, sitting on the grass. She spoke of the satchel's discovery, the prayer book, the stole, and her visit to the church. "I've been so angry, Dad. At Mom, at God, at everything. But now, I just want the truth." Her voice broke, the sea breeze carrying her words away. A soft sob interrupted her. Nearby, a girl of about 12 sat crying under a willow tree, her knees pulled to her chest. Amelia approached gently. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, tears streaking her face. "I'm Lily Carter," she said, her voice small. She pointed to a grave. Elaine Carter, loving mother, 1970 to 2005. "My mom." Amelia's heart ached. "I'm Amelia. Where's your family?" Lily sniffled. "Dad's at work. I come here when I'm sad." Amelia touched her forehead, frowning. "You're burning up. Are you sick?" Lily nodded. "I don't want to go home. Dad's girlfriend, she's mean." Amelia remembered her own lonely years with an uncaring aunt after her mother vanished. "We need to get you to a doctor," she said gently. Lily hesitated. "Can we go to church instead? Mom used to get Holy Communion from the pastor when I was sick. It made me feel better." Amelia froze. Her mother had prepared those same take-home communions for the sick at Grace Covenant. "I know about that," she said softly. "My mom was a pastor there. If you go to the hospital, I'll get you communion and bring it to you." "Deal." Lily nodded. Amelia drove her to Rockport General Hospital, ensuring she was admitted for her fever. While filling out paperwork, she realized she'd left the 1984 journal at the church. She called Grace Covenant, but no one answered. Deciding to return, she drove back, the sky now fading to dusk. At the church, Margaret and Daniel were gone. A young staff member, Ethan, greeted her. "I'm looking for Pastor Margaret or Reverend Daniel," Amelia said, explaining her forgotten journal and need for communion for a sick girl. Ethan led her to the library, where she retrieved the journal. Scanning the shelves, she noticed a book teetering on a high shelf, its spine askew. "I'll fix that," she said, reaching up despite Ethan's protest. The book, Church Governance and Ethics, fell heavily, its pages splaying open. Amelia's breath caught. Her mother's handwriting filled the margins, underlining passages about financial stewardship. God demands honesty in his house. Faint, erased pencil marks revealed Margaret Ellis and Daniel Pierce with question marks, alongside notes about confronting financial misconduct with grace. Amelia's pulse raced. "Can I borrow this?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Ethan hesitated, but logged it in the library record. She requested the communion, and Ethan, uneasy about the sacristy, fetched it himself. Through a window, Amelia saw Margaret and Daniel in the cemetery, digging under a tree. Ethan claimed they were blessing graves, but the scene felt wrong. Pastors didn't dig at dusk. Amelia thanked him and left, the journal, ethics book, and communion set in hand, her suspicions deepening. Amelia intended to head to the hospital, but paused, drawn to the cemetery to thank Margaret and Daniel and probe their odd behavior. The cemetery, a small plot beside the church, was dim in the evening light. Margaret held a plastic bag, Daniel a shovel, both unaware of her approach. "Good evening," Amelia called. They spun, startled, their faces pale. "Amelia!" Margaret's voice was sharp. "Why are you back?" Amelia mentioned retrieving her journal and the communion, then nodded at the shovel. "What's this about?" Daniel cleared his throat. "Relocating a pet's grave. The cemetery's full, so we're moving it with permission." Amelia's instinct screamed. Digging at this hour was bizarre. She noticed Daniel eyeing the ethics book. "Another library book?" he asked tightly. "It fell from a shelf," Amelia said. "It has my mother's notes, so I borrowed it." Margaret's posture stiffened. "Clara was fond of that book," she said curtly. "Return it soon." Amelia nodded, excused herself, and walked to her car, their tense gazes following her. Her phone rang. "Nurse Carter from the hospital. Lily's asking for you. Her father's here." Amelia promised to return soon. As she pulled out, she saw Daniel's car speeding toward the cliffs. Suspicion flared. The road led to remote trails, not homes. She followed, calling Vaughn. "Detective, it's Amelia Harper. I'm following Daniel Pierce. He was digging in the cemetery, claiming it was a pet's grave, and now he's heading to the cliffs with a bag and shovel." "Something's off." Vaughn urged her to stop, but Amelia persisted, keeping her distance. "He might be destroying evidence about my mother. I'll stay back, but I'm following." Vaughn sighed. "Keep the line open and report your location." Amelia trailed Daniel along Seacrest Road, winding toward the cliffs. "We're 6 miles from town, heading to Seacrest Point," she reported, sharing the ethics book's notes and erased names. "Why were they erased?" "Did someone check the book after I left?" At the overlook, Daniel parked, grabbed a headlamp, bag, and shovel, and descended a trail to a lower platform near the cliff's edge. "He's going down the trail," Amelia whispered. "It's dangerous. There's a steep drop to the sea." Vaughn ordered her to stay put, but Amelia, driven by the need for answers, followed with a flashlight. "Reverend Daniel," she called. He spun, his headlamp blinding her. "You followed me?" he snapped. Amelia pressed. "What's in the bag?" "You said it was pet remains." Sirens wailed, and Daniel panicked, dropping the bag. It thudded heavily. Amelia grabbed it, finding her mother's 1985 sermon journal, diary, and bone fragments, including a skull piece. "You hid these," she said, her voice breaking. "These are my mother's remains, aren't they?" Police arrived, stopping Daniel as he tried to jump off the cliff. "I'd rather face God than prison," he muttered. Officers pulled him back, cuffing him. Vaughn radioed for Margaret's arrest. The bag's contents were secured. At the station, Amelia saw Daniel and Margaret in custody. The evidence was laid out. The journal, diary, ethics book, bone fragments, and shovel. "We believe these are your mother's remains," Vaughn said. The diary, damaged but partially legible, revealed Clara's discovery of $15,000 in missing funds and her intent to confront Margaret and Daniel. The sermon journal, better preserved, showed her final sermons urging integrity. Daniel confessed, resentful of Clara's authority and fearing exposure of their embezzlement. They strangled her in 1985, buried her in an unmarked grave under a pet's, and hid her belongings under the stone wall, later moving the journals to dispose of them. Amelia gave her statement, overwhelmed. At the hospital, she shared communion with Lily and her father, the ritual rekindling her faith. Reflecting on the day, meeting Lily, forgetting the journal, following Daniel, she saw divine guidance. She prayed, thanking God, and planned to bury her mother properly and rebuild ties with Grace Covenant. Her heart opened to faith again after 25 years.